Merry Christmas, everybody. And I am so excited to be sitting here with an amazing parent, Jennifer Iannuzzi. And Jennifer is from the Wilton area. And this is Christmas time, and we realize how important family is. And Jennifer has a non-traditional family. And this is why we are sitting here at this Christmas time to talk about an extra blessing that was bestowed on her daughter and how she and her family has evolved through this blessing. Jennifer, thank you for taking time out.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I know it's a busy time at everybody's house this time of year, but
yes, it is.
What's better time to be sitting together to talk about what you're experiencing. But first, would you please introduce yourself to the
I would be happy
the viewers? You can
I would
just
be
look
happy
in this camera.
My name is Jennifer Iannuzzi. I'm a mom of 3. I have 2 boys and a little girl. My sons' names are Ben and Cole. They're 9 and 8. And my daughter is Sydney, and she will be 5 next week.
All right.
And she is, she has special needs. She has a very rare genetic syndrome called Smith-Magenis syndrome. We learned of this syndrome about 3 years ago. And about 6 months ago, we developed or co-founded a foundation to really promote research for this very unknown rare genetic syndrome.
Okay, thank you. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be sitting in two sitting for this conversation. So I want to deal with first things first, and then we are going to transition in later on to all the developments and the relationships that you have found and all the research and things that you're looking to do. You have 2 sons, you just mentioned their ages, plus your husband is also a physician.
Yes, he's a physician.
So you are a well-informed and educated family.
Yes, I guess you could say that.
Yes. However, when you gave birth to Sydney,
right,
your husband alerted you to the fact that something was different with Sydney. Let's talk about that aspect of the birth of Sydney.
Well, my pregnancy with Sydney was normal. Nothing really different than my other 2 pregnancies. Delivery was normal. Shortly after her birth, I would say within hours after she was born, she was taken to the NICU for closer observation. At that point, I myself thought something was a little strange because my other 2 sons had never gone to the NICU. She was there for quite some time. She spent about 9 days in the NICU for some non-specific problems. She had trouble coordinating her suck-swallow, and eating was difficult for her. She was born cross-eyed, which is called strabismus, which was sort of a red flag that something really wasn't right. My husband did. You're absolutely right. He did have a feeling that something more than normal was going on. He was concerned about some of the behaviors that she had in the NICU, but nothing was, so profound that would have had us leave that moment thinking something was wrong. We brought her home, and I think my motherly instinct kicked in that something wasn't right. So I spent probably the better part of the first 6 weeks trying to figure out why she had such difficulty coordinating her suck-swallow. It led us to a neurologist very early on who really didn't have much to offer us at that time. And then we proceeded through, all the beginning milestones you have with a newborn. She was late on all of them. I'd bring her to the pediatrician at the regular follow-ups, and they just would tell me basically, in her own time. Give her time and she'll get there. And to some degree, they were correct with
Yeah,
what
but
they had.
motherly instinct was saying
exactly.
something
I
different.
had a feeling something was more than that. And she met her milestones probably 2 to 3 months behind what should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, and I spent a lot of time on the internet trying to figure out what would cause such delays without any other, major medical problems. Finally, at about 15 months, we went in for her checkup, and her growth really began to slow down. By 18 months, there was no growth, no head growth, no real major, growth on the to chart on the growth chart between 15 and 18 months. That was a red flag. Finally, that was enough of a red flag for the pediatrician to warrant further evaluation.
Right.
That led us to a neurologist who, we met with her, and an extremely experienced neurologist. I mean, really, I have to give her credit, although I did not like the answer she gave me.
But she knew she was on the money.
She was on the money. And she ordered a very aggressive genetic test, which is a fairly new genetic test in the grand scheme of things. I wouldn't quote myself on this, but I would say it's roughly six years old of a genetic type of screening.
Right, right.
Which it is called the microarray, which allows a physician, a geneticist, a neurologist, whatever doctor you're seeing at the time, to really test for every known genetic syndrome, which is, it used to be done where you'd bring your child or the patient to a physician and say, well, this kind of looks like such and such. Let's test for that. So you wait your 3 weeks. If it comes back negative, you're back at the starting gate. Whereas with the microarray, it was
across the board.
Right. So we agreed to have that testing done. And even though we were sitting there and we were getting that test, I still admit I was quite shocked at the results. And about 6 weeks, took 6 weeks to get the answers to that. My husband spoke with the doctor who gave him the diagnosis. And what I think was most alarming was the most she could offer us was, well, I've never really heard of it. Why don't you Google it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
However, thankfully she was assertive enough in doing that. And then the question comes to mind, hindsight, today, as we are speaking, did you ever think, I wish I had gone to see her prior to 18 months? Because I'm sure with the way she conducts business,
right.
if Sydney had seen her earlier, maybe the diagnosis would have been identified. But something, it really doesn't matter.
I hear what you're saying, and I think Smith-Magenis syndrome is a very difficult syndrome to diagnose.
Okay.
Partly because, unlike Down syndrome, there aren't glaring facial features early on, so there isn't something that gives it really alerts any geneticist or neurologist. I think, quite frankly, from my experience, 18 months to 20 months is fairly early to be able to have a diagnosis for it.
Good.
I think what I would have liked, in answer to your question, would I have liked it earlier? Yes, because simply, I don't think it would have changed her prognosis at all.
No,
but for me, the amount of anxiety I had spent 18 months knowing something was wrong.
Right.
I have a lot. Now that I've been in the special needs world, it's a whole new world for me.
Yes.
I've created a whole new life over the past 3 years, and I've met some pretty amazing, incredible people, some of which whom don't have a diagnosis. And I've gone back and forth. Do you want one? Do you not want one? And there's pros and cons to everything. What it allows me is to be able to get to an acceptance point.
That's right.
And move forward.
And
that has
to
been
empower yourself and your family and your community. And as a matter of fact, the community at large, because here you are in the Danbury area, you traveled an hour plus to be here.
Right.
Because you are eager in educating the community.
Very much so. Very much so.
And when you were made aware of the diagnosis, how easy was it to acquire information or research or resource about Smith-Magenis syndrome?
You know, I have two ways to answer that. On one level, it was relatively easy to obtain limited information. There's at this stage of the syndrome, there's really one major organization called PRISMS. When there's one organization, it's pretty easy to find out the basics of what you need to know. It is a wonderful organization that put me in contact with a handful of people, none of which were in my backyard, you know, across the country, quite frankly, across the globe, you know, that you could speak with via internet, maybe have a few phone conversations with, but, and give me pretty much the bare bones of what this syndrome was about. What was frightening and very difficult, the second part of the answer to your question, is that none of the physicians I went to had ever heard of it. There was nobody that could say, okay, Jen, this is what we're going to do. This is what you need to do first. This is what you need to do second. These are the supports you need to put in place. That really didn't exist in my area.
And, you know, so PRISMS is a blessing in disguise, because as you answered the question just now, what I got out of that, if there was no PRISMS, you would still be out there floating in La La Land, because professionally the physicians were not equipped. They were not informed to help you through the stressful time that you have been going through. And no fault of their own.
Absolutely no fault of their own. I needed to bring them the information, and not to jump ahead, but that is one of the biggest reasons why myself and my co-founder for our foundation, the Smith-Magenis Research Foundation, why we felt, Missy Longman and myself felt it was so important to put something like that together, because where PRISMS ended, we hope to sort of
pick up or help to advance and to create more. Because the other thing that PRISMS also offered you was the assurance that you are not alone. And with support, because this co-founder you spoke about, as a matter of fact, she's in Florida. I read in the article you had in the paper. And I must tell the viewers that I'm kind of going back to the beginning, because a friend of mine in the Wilton area, you had an article in the papers, and I had never heard about Smith-Magenis syndrome. And I'm thinking my listeners have never heard about it. So she sent and she said, would you have her on the show?
Yeah, she's a very lovely woman.
Of course, why not? Because people need to be informed, because it might not be their immediate family, but it might be somebody in their place of worship, in their community. And this bit of information is powerful, because it's going to help you to tell somebody else, you know, I heard that lady from Wilton mentioned. So we don't normally, people say, well, it's not my stuff. Everything is our stuff now, because, you know.
It's so interesting you said that, because, you know, truthfully, before Sydney, special needs was not, you know.
Not your stuff.
It was my stuff. I worked in the field previous to becoming a mom. I was a social worker who worked in a day in residential treatment program, and I worked with kids with numerous, you know, social and emotional problems, mental illness, and I worked with a lot of families. But just like you said, it touched me professionally, but it wasn't personal.
It was work. And you work, you did the best, you leave it at work, you go home, you be a mom, a wife, and a community leader.
And I was thankful. I didn't even realize how thankful I could have been for what I had at home. And then with the arrival of Sydney, you know, you mentioned at the beginning a blessing. You know, I can say this now, I couldn't have said this 3 years ago, but she truly is a blessing, because I have really learned the hard way what's really important and what I really am thankful for. And she did that. You know, she really was able to do that for me. So I do consider it a blessing.
And even her brothers, even her siblings too, because in conversation you and I have had, even her brothers are pursuing research and having conversation to see how can they equip themselves to help their sisters?
They're starting to.
Yes,
They're starting to.
yes.
You know, it's still that age kind of makes you a little bit, it's all about me stage, but in little bits and pieces, I see, I can see how Sydney and what she's brought to our family is impacting them.
What's a typical day like for Sydney? Would you like to tell us a bit
Sure,
about
I'll share
that?
it. It's, you know, it's difficult. It's definitely a difficult day. Smith-Magenis syndrome is in many ways a very unique syndrome. You know, there's cognitive impairments, global developmental delays. Many children do suffer from some medical conditions, heart conditions, kidney failure, you know, kidney conditions. But for Sydney, she's a very healthy little girl, thankfully, but major expressive speech delay. So she has a very difficult time communicating. Yes, she's come a long way, and she does a great job, but it does create a tremendous amount of frustrations. And these frustrations tend to lead to tantrums, self-injurious behaviors, a lot of meltdowns throughout the day. Transitions are very difficult. And when you put that in real life, the best way I could explain it is you cannot travel from point A to point B without really preparing her. So they're all day long. It's Sydney, first we're going to go here, then we're going to go there, and you have to write it down. Sometimes you have to create a picture schedule for her. It doesn't make it very easy to flow seamlessly through you. There's no
spontaneity.
there really is not much of that in our day. It does impact our family because my boys, you know, we tend to split up a lot so that they can go to their sporting activities, their play dates, their friends, and Sydney can't move that quickly. You know, she needs a lot of warm up to the transition. She needs one-to-one support to be able to cope with daily stresses that we take for granted.
Yes.
What I mean by that is going into the grocery store, picking out the stuff that you need, coming out.
Going to the post office.
Right, she needs to be walked through all of that. At school, they have her on quite a structured program that allows for, you know, real help in the transition.
I'm going to go to school next, but I want to just go back a bit. What is the cause of Smith-Magenis syndrome?
That's a great question. Smith-Magenis syndrome is what they refer to as a microdeletion syndrome. So it is a tiny piece of chromosome 17 is missing. You have two arms of your chromosome, a short arm and a long arm of chromosome 17. And on on one of the arms, a small piece is missing. And primarily, the most crucial piece that's missing is the RAI1 protein. And we believe, researchers have learned now, that the RAI1 is responsible for a lot of the neurobehavioral aspects of Smith-Magenis syndrome that lead to these poor coping skills, meltdowns, the tantrums, the unique self-injurious behaviors that you rarely see in very many other syndromes. That's what it is. It is amazing to me how a tiny piece of DNA could really do that. And
why the name Smith-Magenis syndrome?
Anne Smith, a geneticist, and Ellen McGinnis, another geneticist, founded this syndrome. So that's how the name came to be. Smith and McGinnis, named after the two founding researchers.
Where does majority, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, the bulk of the money for this research, where does it come from?
Well, that's an excellent question that you bring that up. There is not a lot of money at all for this research. PRISMS, don't quote me on this, but has been around, say, for about 10, 12 plus years. Anne Smith heads up PRISMS and has done a wonderful job bringing it as far as it's come so far, getting small grants from the NIH, from fundraisers, but truthfully, that's it.
That's it,
and,
that's right.
You know, again, not to jump ahead, but excuse me, that's how Missy Longman and myself both felt that it was time.
Yeah, yeah. Sip some water when
It was
there's
time
a need
to
for, because
move forward with more research.
yeah. Take a sip of water. Are there medication that Sydney has to take each day?
There are no medications specifically for Smith-Magenis syndrome. There are medications you use to alleviate the symptoms.
Symptoms of it, yeah.
But my hope is that with our foundation, with more dollars raised,
Yeah, we
more
can
money can be put to really understanding the function of what's missing, of the microdeletion, so that we can develop, form, create more targeted drugs
Yeah.
that could help with the syndrome.
What's her dietary requirements? Does she need to be on a specific diet, or?
She doesn't have any specific diet, but to give that answer, you know, a fair answer to that question, there are families out there who do special diets based on the information and research that's been done in the autism community, because some of the behaviors are very similar. There is some overlap there, and some families have found success with those diets.
Yes, because it's I don't know whether you're a family that sticks to organic foods or not, but I have a few clients that have kids with autism and that, and they are reporting that changing their dietary things, intake and things, it's improving. So it's no one thing, it's a combination of things. And the parents are just as assertive as you are and going out and seeking and searching.
Well, you know, when there is no clear answer, when there is no clear treatment, you'll do just about anything.
That's right.
And you're willing to try just about anything.
Especially when it comes to your baby.
Absolutely.
When it comes to your kids,
I don't fault any family for trying anything that's outside of the box, because a lot of these syndromes, autism, Smith-Magenis, are so. I mean, autism is not rare, but not enough is known
about it. And
yet.
It's like, you look back now and the researches are coming and the information is becoming more available now. And you look back, maybe the people my age who had those syndromes from way back when, but there was nothing for them. And it takes me back to something like mental illness, schizophrenia.
Yep.
I remember being back home in Jamaica, and when somebody would, in the country where I was living, would have a schizophrenic attack, instead of them taking them to the hospital, they would tie them down on the bed and stuff like that.
Right.
Because they didn't know.
They didn't know. I know.
They didn't know better. And look, people are living productive lives now with schizophrenia.
I know. It's very true.
People need to be assertive, and that's why I commend you and your co-founder for the journey that you are on in letting people be aware. Because, Jennifer, believe me, I know that your hands are full.
Yeah.
You did not have to be out there doing for others. You could stay in your little cocoon, and you could find it out for your family and say, forget about the world.
Right.
But no, you want to let the world know. You want to let the world know what is happening, and I thank you. We have 3 minutes remaining in this segment. If there's one thing you would like the viewers to remember this segment for, what would maybe 2 or 3 things be that you want them to remember?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I want people to be able to realize that when something unexpected happens in your life, kind of to, you know, when the dust settles, embrace it and try to turn it into something that gives meaning to what happened.
Yes.
Because the last thing I wanted was for this to sort of stop me in my momentum in my life. And I didn't want that to be for my children either. So it was very important for me to turn this, I mean, I'm reluctant to call it a tragedy, but way back when in the early days, it felt like a tragedy.
That's right.
And I didn't want that to define us.
That's right.
And I wanted to turn it into something bigger bigger and more hopeful.
Exactly.
So that to me is really the most important thing I'd love people to walk away with, and it doesn't just pertain to special needs. It pertains
anything.
to any, obstacle, tragedy, anything you didn't expect in your life. So,
I love what you just said, because what I see has happened since you gave birth to Sydney. The mommy who gave birth to Sydney, I don't think is the mommy who is now sitting in this chair.
No.
I think a new mommy has evolved. And the mommy that gave birth to the two sons, this is a new mommy has evolved. And maybe way back when somebody asked you about all those things, you would have thought you didn't have the strength and the energy to do that.
Well, it absolutely, and that's how the name of my my fundraiser page, Strength for Sydney, had come about, because that came from my husband, who had come home one night and gave me this beautiful ring, and on it inscribed "Strength for Sydney." And basically,
Ooh, don't let me cry. Oh, wonderful.
He basically said that this is a new chapter in our life.
Yes.
And when you feel like you can't go another day, look down at that ring and it will give you the strength.
And this is the ring?
This is the ring.
Oh, you got to hold it up to the camera over here.
This is the ring.
There is
So,
it.
yes,
Okay.
it was a lovely thing that he
Yes,
did.
yes, yes.
It was kind of the catalyst, in my opinion, that sparked all of this. I didn't know it at the time at all. I didn't know it at the time, but as the years went on, that's what it turned into.
And 1.5. So, how is it for your husband? Because I know being a physician and all of that. How is this for him?
We make a very good pair, because he really is quite a rock throughout all of this. Yes. He doesn't get into all of the emotional nitty-gritty that I've dealt with, but he always has that same old phrase, it is what it is, and we'll do whatever we have to do.
Wonderful.
And with that truly gives me the strength to go off and do all of the stuff that I do.
We are all dealt a deck of cards.
We are.
And we got to play the hand we have. I don't know your hand, you don't mind hand, but we are both playing to have a winning game. Yes. Again, I thank you,
so
Jennifer.
Much,
I thank
really.
you.
Thank
and
you.
yes, we are going to remain for the second segment, and we will be focusing on the Foundation for Sydney, strengthforsydney.org. And we want to encourage you to visit the website and, leave a message there for Jennifer to help encourage her, and all that you can do to make sure that Strength for Sydney is a great. Stay tuned. Don't you go any place.